Welcome everyone to the first Art Forum presentation of Semester 2 2025. A few technical issues, as is invariably going to happen at some point. My name is Matt Warren and I will host and introduce our speaker, Sally Rees, today. I acknowledge that we are meeting and working on the land, beneath the skies and alongside the waterways of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people. I acknowledge that a large percentage of the original inhabitants of Tasmania did not survive colonisation, and I recognise that sovereignty was never ceded, and I pay my respects to traditional custodians. And I look forward to a future where there exists a greater realisation of what an honour it is to live and work on this land. I'm currently situated and speaking to you from the Hunter Street campus in Nipaluna, Hobart, Lutruwita, Tasmania, and we are streaming live to the, hopefully, to the Inverest campus in the north of the state and around the country and indeed around the world. And I recommend that you consider the original and traditional custodians, First Nations people, of where you are currently situated. So welcome. Today's speaker is Dr. Sally Rees. She'll talk about her currently exhibited work, Tammy, at Sawtooth ARI in Launceston, amongst other elements of her practice to date. I should perhaps make mention that Sally is my partner, but rather than talk about that, I'd like to briefly talk about our shared medium as a way to introduce her. So being as we are a couple, I've had access to her process and techniques for many years. We both went through this art school as undergrads alongside peers such as Sean Bacon, Troy Ruffles, Aaron Horsley, Robin Petterd, to name just a few, doing what was then called video. The video studio on the bottom floor was our second home a lot of the time. And although video art as a form had been around since the 1960s, in the scheme of things, obviously it was a fairly new medium and discipline, particularly here in Tasmania. And although we were all given some great contextual info and some technical know-how along the way, a lot of the work produced back then in the early to mid-90s was trial and error, and a lot of it was learning from making. And you will have noticed from the list of artists I mentioned earlier, it could be a little blokey as a discipline. Sally was one of the few women taking or working in this form at the time, and she forged a path that did and continues to explore interesting intersections of the physical and the ephemeral, screens and objects, mark making and projection. And these are indeed explorations, and by making, greater meaning is revealed. So without much further ado, I'm happy to introduce Sally Rees.
Hello, and thanks for coming. And hello, Inverest, who I can't see, but I believe you are there. Tammy is a work I created last year that's just opened at Sawtooth ARI last week and is there for the next month. For those of you in Inverest, and if any of you here in Hobart are heading up that way, there's a couple of other terrific shows there at the same time. I'm going to start with Tammy and I will circle back to her as well. I'm half off the cuff, half reading to you. Just forgive me. In the end, I hope it all makes sense. I don't work in a very linear way. I reflect a lot and I look back on myself a lot. So I've tried to put dates with everything in the presentation, but you'll probably notice that it doesn't move forwards in a simple fashion. It jumps around, but I hope I make sense. So Tammy is really logical to talk about right now because of her recent installation. This is Tammy when I installed her for the first time at the Moona Arts Centre last year. for a show called Sleepwalkers. Talking about where Tammy comes from is almost integrally also about how a practice stops and starts, and how it needs to negotiate around a life. So that'll be a part of all this. I hope that again, God, I hope this makes sense. So Tammy is kind of an emergence from stasis. At the time when Tammy came into being, I hadn't made a finished work for quite a while. I had taken a job that, although all the pieces made sense that it should work out for me, I wasn't very happy there. Stayed longer than I should have because of reasons. And it took me leaving to start to make work again, which I'm very relieved Tammy arrived. She's an assemblage, as pretty much see, the figure of a dog made of bits of things that were lying around my studio, and the head is a illusion that was invented for the stage once upon a time called a Pepper's Ghost. I wanted to make a Pepper's Ghost forever. I used to have a bit of just a passing interest in grand guignol theatre, which was that very, very gory form of, basically like a slasher film on the stage for pre-talkies times. And they were frequently used in that form. And they also are used, peppered all the way through, what's it called, at Disneyland? The Haunted Mansion uses Pepper's Ghosts everywhere. And it's actually incredibly simple. I never made one before because I thought it would be too expensive and complicated, because I was thinking about life-size figures all the time. And then there's a guy, I wrote down his name, Joshua Ellingson. He's a VJ and a video artist based in the States, and he's got an Instagram account, and he uses them frequently and will talk about the process. And he made one really delightful one out of the sort of rounded, transparent top of a slushy cup sitting on top of his iPhone. And all it takes within that space is another angled piece of plastic, which he cut off the rest of the cup. And he even uploaded the video to YouTube of a little goldfish swimming around so that you could try it yourself. And it was so simple, I just suddenly realised that it didn't have to be huge. And I'll go more into Tammy a bit further on, but there were just some, before she came along, once he showed me how it was done so easily at different sizes, I was, faffing around with it a lot in the studio and clustering a bunch together, and so then playing with how many images I could fit into the one screen. I didn't actually say that. If it's not clear from the images you've seen so far, it's basically a screen on its back, and a moving image facing up, and then an angled, shiny, transparent surface that basically reflects it back at someone approaching it from the front. So it's incredibly basic, it's incredibly simple, but because you're able to use a transparent surface, obviously once upon a time in theatre they would use glass. It's so, they're really captivating because you see through them, clearly. So I'm just going to cycle back a bit. If you don't know anything about my work, I'll just talk about what was coming before the silence. At one time, it's not the first time that's happened to me. When I was had my first baby, my only baby, when I had a baby, as happens with a lot of people, things slow down a lot. And I was still making, but not very often. And at one point, playing with my camera and a cheap printer and finding little tiny pockets of time when my son was asleep, I sort of pulled out some watercolours. I was trying to find a way to make sense of that kind of post-pregnancy fog, and it felt like something that I couldn't see, so I wanted to see it. I made this little animation. It was the first time I'd ever done anything quite like it. And I liked it so much, I decided I should go and do a PhD about it. So that's what I did. This is one of the later animations from my PhD. The sound of it drives people crazy at the TMAG. You may have seen that it's since been acquired for the TMAG collection, which was one of the most exciting things that ever happened to me. My PhD, I was thinking a lot about... I'll move on because it's so loud. Energy, this strange fog, how energy connects to thought. All these things were kind of spilling out into quite a bit of oogie-boogie parapsychology stuff. But also neurology. I was really interested in new science around the plastic brain. A man, Dr. John Duke, perhaps, wrote a wonderful book called The Brain That Changes Itself, about plasticity and about how thought can actually recarve new pathways in the brain. Is that too loud? And how do I stop that? Using the computer's volume button. So this is an image of the thesis installation. This is stuff going on so you get a bit of a sense of it. I've been working with video for so long that part of my experience at the time of doing this PhD was that I found that since projectors had become, well, earlier in my career as a video artist, projectors were a bit of a problem because you'd want to exhibit at a gallery and they didn't have one and I didn't have one, and we couldn't rent one without spending more money than anyone had. So often it was really a difficult thing to actually show. So I sort of learned to be a bit more forgiving of monitors. And by the time I was doing my PhD, the monitors sort of felt like the sad, sorry cousin of the projector. Projectors immediately make everything massive if that's what you want. It has that interactive quality where people walk in front of it and let it fall across their bodies, which is really seductive. But it also sort of felt a bit, it felt like the content could get lost to the experience of the bigness and the light. So I wanted to learn to love monitors again and present them in interesting ways. So I started to think of them as containers rather than windows. Can I do little fast forwardy things? No. I'll go back. Oh, I've screwed it all up. Anyway, the screens I used rather than hanging them on the wall tended to lean around the gallery on poles and against walls, and they just sat and were clunky objects. And it felt for me like this sort of spooky energy that I was trying to find through paint was contained. So it was captured and present, but it was also safe, you know. I thought a lot during that time too about the fact that if you work with video, once you turn it off, it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And so I was thinking a lot about electricity too, and the way that is safely contained. And, in the end, by the end of the PhD, I'd been also thinking a lot about magic, because I was thinking about this idea of thought as a force, thought that can shift things, thought that can carve new paths in your brain. And at one point it occurred to me, seeing as I was looking at all this oogie-boogie stuff anyway, that, you know, maybe that's what magic is, or what magic had been supposed to be at some time. The thought actually has a force. If you can think something and something changes, ultimately, in theory, because most people can't do it, possibly no one, you know, it is an energy with some kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Weight, gravity, force. It's just the word force again. So, occult practices became a way that I explored magic. Reading about different people's methods, techniques, and looking at those as ways to make work, as opposed to necessarily cast a spell, anything else. Sorry, I know you saw all this before. I also drew a relationship between the processes of purposeful intervention in thought. So like hypnosis, mantras, and how they shared things with protests, chants, prayers, this idea of repeating something looping and going in and over itself. And loops are a convenient, neat way to show video in a gallery setting. They make it easier in some ways for people, I think, because they make it more like the picture hanging on the wall. People, even in this late stage, sometimes find video content difficult in an art sense. And so I've always wanted to make it easier for people, if I can, to just understand it in the same way as everything else they might look at in a gallery. And sometimes making something just an ongoing picture is a good way to do that. But the loops were something else. They stopped being about time and about time moving from one point to another. They become more about a rhythm, like music. Whether or not they have sound, you can start to feel the rhythm of their loops, and the shorter they get, the punchier that rhythm is. And all of these things felt integrally related to that idea of the energy and the thing we can't see. I think I'm talking too long about my PhD, and I'm going to move on. The next thing that happened to me after that was incredible, amazing. I was awarded a fellowship, one of 3 female identifying artists in Australia. An incredible artist who I admired a great deal in my undergrad in the 90s, Katthy Cavaliere, bequested the money for these 3 fellowships. Thank you. And each of the 3 artists was connected to an institution to deliver a show of the work resulting from the time of the fellowship. And I was fortunate to get Mona, which was entirely an accident. I don't know what process the gallery directors went through to decide who got which artist, but apparently Mona didn't know I was from Tasmania, so it was just an accident, and convenient that I could just drive up the road and work up there. This was a difficult process because it was designed around my, the show was called CRONE, and it was something I wanted to do to celebrate turning 50. I was getting very nervous about statistics about older women in Australia, and I still had a bit of the witch work stuck in my head, and I wanted to create a sigil, which is a magic symbol, a container for a spell, essentially. And for me, I just think of a spell as hope. I hope this happens. I wanted to create an image for myself of something that was much tougher, much more resilient, much less vulnerable than the pictures I was being presented with. It was a wonderful way to work out some more of those animation thoughts with the support and the time to crunch it through. It was bigger than Ben-Hur. On my 50th birthday, there was an action planned. But unfortunately, I don't want to be the person who stands there and talks about the pandemic, but the pandemic happened. And as a result, everything got waylaid, postponed. Mona closed when we were a day away from finishing the install, and everything went on ice for nearly 2 years before it came up again. It was because I had to cancel the action, which I considered still doing for a while, but there didn't seem any point if it wasn't my birthday anymore. It had happened and gone. The works were, the central works, my figure and a figure with my mother had a couple of phases. So they were all due to change over with my 50th birthday from one phase to a second. We'd swap out one video in the gallery for another. And of course that couldn't happen either. So these first versions, I accidentally stumbled across, I'd forgotten, but I put them up on my website for a week before my birthday, and so that they were somewhere in the world and could change in a way when they eventually went up. That's my mum. But I had to pull them down, you know, in the end, because I wasn't that before 50 witch anymore. Eventually, when it did go up, I mean, again, amazing. Mona is an incredible machine in so many ways, and I have been working for a long time, but a relatively unknown artist, and suddenly it was bigger than Ben-Hur, and the marketing machine was massive, and I've never had more attention in my life, and it's not entirely a comfortable thing, but it was nice that everyone was so interested. We'll walk through the exhibition. I think, again, I'm just lagging behind too much. I'm going to go on too long. So I am moving on. Nothing. After CRONE ended, I worked all the way through the fellowship, which you're not supposed to do. The money's there, so you don't have to work. But I worked. I saved as much money as I could. I saved my artist fees from the show. We saved, and we reached a point where we were this far away from being able to get a mortgage and buy our own house. To do that, someone had to have a permanent job, and we had about a year before my age again was going to change the goalposts of getting a mortgage. So I went and I got the job where I wasn't very happy. And that's when nothing started happening. And the nothing went on, and I remembered when I'd had a baby, and I thought, well, it'll come back. But it didn't. I sort of pretended it was still going for a while because some of the works from the 3 shows that resulted out of this massive fellowship were curated into a show with some of Katthy, the artist who made the bequest before she died, with some of Katthy Cavaliere's works, and so the 4 artists' work travelled around Australia together. I had some great opportunities to visit some regional galleries, places I hadn't been before, and one of the showings of that show happened to coincide with what would have been Kathy's 50th birthday. The curator invited me to come and do an artist talk, but he also said, if you'd like to do something else, go for it. The primary symbol of the CRONE within that show was the fake nose, the big fake witch nose, and all the people who all these wonderful women who came to perform for me. The women who were already past the age of 50, I made them wear a nose in the studio, and the women who weren't quite there yet, they were with me on this just almost side. They were depicted without them. So the nose was the big deal, and you get a nose when you turn 50. So I cast one in incense, and there's this beautiful jacaranda tree outside Mildura Arts Centre, and we tacked it up, and after the we went outside and set fire to it, and all hung around and had a nice chat before it disappeared. But it's, you know, it's that, how do you communicate with a ghost, you know? It was kind of a defunct gesture in a way, but that's my speciality. So it's such a traditional, primitive thing to try and communicate with the spirits through smoke. So that's what I did. So I made one work, and I quite liked it. And I think I'll make some more things like that sometime. Jumping back, this is one of those jumping backs. In 2015, I had like a year or so to go on my PhD, and there was a visiting curator from the States who was curating a project for what's now CAT. And she asked me if I'd make a work for it, and I was too stressed, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was actually trying to put her off. After a couple of meetings, I came back and I said, look, the only thing I really want to do is there's this artist whose work I really, really love, and I would send you to go talk to her, but I don't know where she is. I don't know what she's doing. I don't even know if she lives in Hobart anymore. She and I did our masters around the same time. Her name's Rowan Reynolds, and she made the most exquisite, beautiful, delicate work. She hung racks on the wall with these white, thick towels, and then the towels were piled with flour, so it sort of clung to the pile of the towels, and everything could be destroyed in a minute. This straight-back wooden chair laid with hundreds of thousands of individual white silk threads that covered it like a big, sexy spider had done its thing on it. Such beautiful work, and a really nice person, also very shy and very quiet. I knew the last time I'd seen her had been in the TMAG. She was working there. And I asked around, and someone knew where she was and got me the details. So eventually I contacted her, and I'd spoken to this curator and said, so I'd like to find this artist. I'd like you to put their work in the gallery if I can find them. Or basically the work is I want to go find them or not find them. I don't know what's going to happen. Let's see, that's the work. And I was trying to fob her off really in a way, but she thought it sounded interesting, so she said go ahead. And I did find Rowan, obviously, who was living in Bothwell, and I would spend various visits with her, talking and catching up, looking at what she was doing. She really had wanted to buy property a great deal, you know, and she'd taken on extra work with TMAG, not just as an invigilator, but she'd started working there as a cleaner as well. And I found it fascinating that she was turning this now into work that was the inverse of this delicate whiteness. She was really interested in what happens in the bottom of buckets when they're full of filth and the way things settle when it gets kicked. And so she was making all these bucket bottoms, basically, that she would then let dry out, experimenting with different pigments in the water instead of dirt to see what she could produce. And as interesting an artist to me as she always was. In the end, she said, I've always thought it would make a great video, and you could. And so I showed her how to pull a video together, and in the end there was, the work was, the video here that's not running, of Rowan's, can I make that happen? Can I make that happen? Nah. never mind. But a video of the kicking and the settling, and there's a couple of manholes in the floor at CAT, so we installed the screen looking up and down under the floor. You could look down into it. And I thought it was beautiful. The work was that, an online diary I kept of the studio visits, and then another piece of writing that went up online and into the show catalogue as well about what that whole experience had been. But people found it really confusing. Like, for me, in the end, it was what came out of this work. A new work of Rowan Reynolds was in the gallery, and I thought, well, that's great, and I really love it. But people didn't really know it was hers because they were expecting to see something from me. No one could be bothered reading anything online. It was very strange. And I was feeling kind of, as I was wrapping up this last piece of writing, I was feeling kind of bad about it, actually. But one of the last things that I added online was leaving Rowan's house. I came across this really cute Suffolk sheep on the highway that had clearly come from a paddock of other Suffolk sheep. And I took out my phone, was shooting video of how cute it was and trying to shoo it back in, and it wouldn't go. And it was very frustrating. And I almost accidentally chased it on the road a couple of times. And in the end, I gave up. And then it just walked through this hole in the fence that had been there the whole time. And I was trying to wrap up this thing, and I showed it to a friend, and they said something beautiful about, well, maybe this is about the Rowan thing, and maybe it's important someone cares that you're in the paddock, and then you can go yourself. Which is kind of sweet, but yeah. Anyway, I remembered this project, and it was really important to me that artists can always work. It doesn't matter if you stop for a while. Anyway, that's why I put Rowan Reynolds project in. And then my nice partner bought me a cyanotype kit one Christmas. And I began to play again and buy more chemistry when those ran out. And I'm still doing them. I find them, that's not me. These are just still images. Cyanotype are alchemical chemical. But for me, I'm not really a wet photographer. I had a go at it once upon a time, and it was wonderful, but it feels magic to make them. But it's also, I think I was using them here to talk about, there's these three primary things that seem to, when I look back, run through everything that I'm making. And one of those things is indexicality, which is a term, I think, coined by Rosalind Krauss. She certainly uses a lot to talk about photographs and how, it's her word to explain how we believe what we see in a photograph. Even now, in understanding Photoshop exists, and well, now with AI stuff as well, but there's still something convincing about a photograph. And indexicality is really important to me. I like to keep an element of something real in everything. And with cyanotypes, or cyanotype photograms anyway, which is the way I operate, is, an object is laid directly on top of the paper and light falls across it, and there's a record that it was there. And so for me, that's really exciting, because I can also then take those objects and present them as something else, like those little guys, like the guys in space over there, who are really just a couple of toys under a pile of elderberries in my garden. Yeah, really satisfying. And I'm still making lots of cyanotypes. This one got into the Bernie Print Prize, and I'm suddenly a printmaker. But yeah, I really enjoy, and a really interesting way to explore the house where we ended up in the very distant suburbs of New Norfolk. Like, not just New Norfolk, but like the back of New Norfolk. Another way I work with indexicality is the found object. And for me, found objects are, what they are is a very broad definition. I think of found objects as objects, but also as songs, as texts, as thoughts, sometimes even as part of my own autobiography. I'm happy to take those things and apply them in other ways. The one on the left, video that's not working, is a very straightforward collage of found video, found film, with some of my own animation integrated as elements. On this side is the script from a project I did called A Pack of Lies, which is still out there on the internet, a series of podcasts, 16 podcasts, where I took biographies I found in the op shop, famous people, sports people, actors, etc., and replaced their name and pronouns, if necessary, with my own, and then handed them all to a bunch of my friends and got them to read them for me. So the podcast is 16 different potential lives I could have had. You know, some of them I've died, some of them I became a really, really successful football player, an actress. I think this one was Farrah Fawcett, and there's a lot of stuff about how awesome my hair is. Yeah, it's a project I really enjoyed, and I really like having the opportunity to go, hey, this existed, when I talk about what I do. Oh, look, there you go. Just needed a little kick up the bum. This one near me here, the big polar bear, is another one from that series. Assemblage, another conceptual methodology. I smush things on top of each other. These found objects, I overlay them with other things. I find it's something that when I was doing my PhD and I was talking about the video and the watercolour over the top, I would speak about them in terms of the record and the construct. And the more I thought about it, I could apply that across this whole gamut of work that I'd done across time, where there's a recording of something real and then there is something applied over the top that is a construct. And the construct makes the recording more fantastic and more amazing, and the record makes the construct something that could be real. So they play off each other in this interesting way, and I find applying assemblage, again, a bit like my very broad definition of the found object, my definition of assemblage in my own studio is also very broad. It's not only about physical things, it's about thoughts and ideas, taking a way of doing this thing and turning it into a way to make art. On the, what is that? The left. On the left there are images from a project I did called the Gudmundsdottir Summoning. And I opened a magic workshop downstairs in the Plimsoll Gallery, looking at some basic forms. There's a couple of aspects of it there you can see. The point of the whole exercise, I thought if I really am going to play with magic, then it's really important that the stakes be pretty low, because if it worked, you know, there's no way anyone can get hurt. So the objective was to try and get Björk to perform in Tasmania. It seemed not too unrealistic, given the festivals that had emerged through Mona, that maybe it might be a possibility. So I drew this image of her that's at the top on the far left, and Rob O'Connor was in the Australia Council of New York studio at the time, and I sent him an email and I said, would you print this out and carry it around New York for me, because that's where she lived at the time, and then I'd like you to bring her back on the plane. Could you please bring Björk back on the plane for me? So he did, and he kindly sent me hundreds of photos of Björk on her adventures around New York, at one point quite close to her house, her actual house. He stuck her on a chopstick and we'd take her around. When she got home, of course, I took her straight up the mountain, which is the bottom photo. And she is still in my studio, standing on her chopstick in a little pile of dirt, because there was no rule about when the spell ends. Like, she still won't come. some friends got very excited about a year later that Björk was coming to DJ in Sydney. It's not the same. That's not the spell. I said, oh, you did it. Oh, no, I didn't. Hasn't happened yet. So it might still. She fell in the sink a few times at the old house, actually, because she was up on the windowsill. She's okay. Then we also had, karaoke sessions. So we're trying to charge the action with the power of group song. So I made a bunch of karaoke videos of my own for her, a number of her tracks, gathered some volunteers, and we were doing two types of performance. That is a closed performance. There's a photo of there that was actually at the opening, I think, of the exhibition it was in, gratis, curated by Sam Johnson. I'd also made myself this hat at the top, which would sit as an object in the gallery when I wasn't there, but then I would also use it. It was based on a headdress that she was wearing on the cover of one of her albums. I can't remember which one. Vespertine? No, not Vespertine. One of the albums. But in the shape of a traditional witch's hat. So I could wear it when I was working in there, but the rest of the time it could sit there on a spooky skull. There were also, sky-clad, naked karaoke sessions, which were closed. Everyone was okay with me having video and photos, but there's been a couple of times people said, that's popped up and I wasn't expecting to see it anymore. So I'm sparing them, their bums on screen today. But both of these are sort of picked out as these examples of ways to layer things on top of each other. I have no idea what the time is. Oi! Go crack through. One of the other things that threads through everything, I didn't know how to classify it other than call it nothing up my sleeve, but is that I always worry that the reputation of artists amongst the greater population of Australia is not real good, that people seem to want to expose us as charlatans and fakers and people with no skill and nothing to offer who are just, sponging off the government, and which always, pisses me off, pisses everybody off in the arts. But I often feel a bit like trying to make video easier for people to understand in a gallery. I often want to make sure that I'm not operating in a way where people are going to feel like they're going to be tricked or even though I love illusions and tricks, and I'll use them often, I always want people to see how it was done. I don't want it to be a hidden thing, and I think that's part of my way of trying to build trust again, because many other places in the world, my experience isn't like that. Yeah, basically. And so for me, two of the things that translate for me there are amateurism is one. In performance sense, amateurism is what I look to, and I love it. I love something done not perfectly but with enthusiasm. My master's project was all about karaoke, actually, for that reason. Yeah, and these are two works which the cassette says what it is. It's I had a recording of a friend who'd passed away that her brother gave me of her singing various songs. So I performed one with her, and it's just a small recording of that. It's a piece that I've never put out online, and it belongs in a gallery on headphones. I don't broadcast that one anywhere, or we'd like to do everything else, because it's not right. It just feels right to be like a little quiet thing. And I bunged in another animation because I'm not a painter. I try to get better, and I think I do get better, actually. But I love that it's clear what's going on. It's clear what's happening. When these animations play out, it's paint, and you can see it move, and that's sort of magic and fun, but it's still paint. There's no pretense to be anything else, really, convincingly. Oh, All you have to do is try and move on. And there's another one. What did I say there? Oh, labour, endurance and rhythm. And that's the thing again about loops that go on forever. I've done quite a few works that were just about working over a long time to do a difficult task. Matt and I actually, and another artist, Deborah Pollard, at one stage did a work which was almost in the slideshow, but it all got too confusing and I was going on for too long, called the coffee petal transport problem, where we exploded a cannon of rose petals in a room and then dropped 2 bags of coffee beans on the floor and then spent as long as it took to get them all up to pick every piece up. And the only rules were that you had to pick them up one by one. We made 2 little remote control cars, one brown one for the coffee and a pink one for the petals. And we would take turns to, one person would do the picking, one person would drive the cars to the third, who would be operating a grinder, a coffee grinder, and be processing that stuff into powder. So we spent all day doing that and rotating at particular times, I don't know, every hour or something, when we kept going until everything had been processed into these 2 small piles of pink and brown. I've done other things, again downstairs in the plimsoll actually, with confetti, like just chucking confetti everywhere and then dividing it all up into its individual coloured piles. I think I stopped doing it after the rice counting at Mona. I went, oh. But I think it's a very, very interesting process to lose yourself in. And I think I would be good at working in a factory. If you own one and want to give me a job. I'm a knitter too, and I found when we moved to our place and there's a big cabbage tree, I found out I could process the fibre into string and then I could weave with that string. And the process of, other women's crafts outside of witchcraft have a lot of that rhythmic, meditative stuff, and I love it. And I see it coming through a lot of works. Does this make sense? I haven't asked that again yet. So, back in the studio, I've been reflecting on all this stuff since things have sort of started to kick along again. And it's been a reflection on, excuse me, past works that I've enjoyed making the most and things that I want to return to again to experience and consider and pick up what worked and leave what didn't and then make something else that's a bit like it but is not the same thing. This is more recent work that I hope would get into title, but it didn't. I forgot to talk about hauntology, which I don't know what subject I put that under, but the idea that your past reappears as a ghost in the form of memory in surprising ways. For me, it's aesthetics, and it's the aesthetics of television that I saw as a kid is always suddenly is this really, it's an attractive thing that I've wanted to make, and then when I finally see it, it's like part of the opening credits for some 70s thriller show. Yeah. More cyanotypes. And here, well, I'm back again. Here's Tammy in Launceston on Friday night. It's so good to have her up again. She makes me really happy, not just because I finished a work and she's out in the world and she's really successful. She was also making a dog when I didn't have one. We were mourning a dog and we hadn't yet got our new dog, who's our flatmate, who's moved in with us as of November. No, we weren't ready, but I needed one, so I made one. So she was sort of born of just falling in love with an image of a dog because I missed mine so much. But also being trusted by a group of artists who approached me and said, would you like to be in this exhibition? And I said, I haven't made anything in 3 years. And they went, oh, well. Which was a lovely thing, to be trusted to produce something that wouldn't embarrass everyone. She's also the advice of a very wise friend of mine who when he came to talk to me about what I was doing for this show, I described a bunch of really convoluted concepts that I had made no attempt to actually realise. And I made an admission that I had this compulsion to just meticulously carve out this video of this little dog's head out of its background, and that's all I want to do. I just wanted to keep looking at her. And so he suggested that sometimes compulsion's enough, and that it must have a purpose. So I carried on and realised I could use her as my ghost that I wanted to create. And then I wanted her to be high enough that I could look her in the eye. So I pulled these tables, one inherited from each grandma, and so piled them up underneath her. They still weren't high enough, and I started piling the books. And I have a book problem. I have too many books, and I'm particularly interested in non-fiction, how to do things, books. So I started then deliberately choosing books that I thought were useful in some way. And she started becoming this kind of service animal in a way with a built-in library. All the sort of things that no matter how bad stuff gets, Tammy will help you through. She's named Tammy actually after a friend of mine's dog that I never met, but she would always speak of Tammy the Black Labrador in these sort of reverent tones and replace the terms thank God with thank dog and thank Tommy the big black Labrador in the sky whenever anything good happened. So Tammy is Tammy. Now, I did have something else I wanted to say, but I wanted to do that thing where you read something rather than just speak off the cuff, and then I'll be done. There's a phrase I heard last year called nailing jelly to a wall. That's how it goes. And so she's sort of the starting point of a new period of jelly nailing for me. It feels like it's something that I've always done. This thing with this thing doesn't exist, so I'm going to pull them together, and I wonder if that's something when it is. And it's always pursued, never knowing if it will be something when it's done. So she is actually one of the reasons that ARIs exist. And thankfully, the same group of people have asked me to come and do another exhibition, which is going to happen at Good Grief next year. And then directly following that, I've got a solo at Good Grief next year as well. And Good Grief have amazingly accepted my proposal, which is just I'm making a bunch of shit and I don't know what it is. So what I'd like to do is bring all my shit into your gallery and then I'll work it out. And they went, that sounds great. And I went, great. So that's what I'm going to do. And so in the spirit of that, I just threw a bunch of the shit I've been making into the last slide altogether. And then, which I haven't done, put all these things together. And I found that kind of exciting. I don't know what I was going to read to you. Oh, Shiza. Nailing jelly to a wall. I wonder what it was. The last thing I will say is that I have been trying to. I do a lot of writing as well, purely as a way to understand what it is that I'm doing. I often don't know what it is that I'm doing until I either tell someone or write it down. And I'm often on my own, so I just write it down. And I was quite happy with something that I'd written, which was actually about what am I trying to do? And I'm going to stop. And I think it's actually about trying to create a thing that generates some kind of sympathetic resonance. And I wrote a combination of component elements that, like a key in a lock, can set up a vibration between artefact and viewer, between the human audience and the thing that their senses, but even more so their consciousness lands on. A feeling, a vibration, as if the artefact and the body together were a struck gong. It's something that has an action in and on the body that gradually subsides and then it rises again just a little bit, and it feels like a resonant knowing, something that's pre-verbal, something that's quite primitive. And you can't describe it because there isn't language for it. But it's like a mycelium-shaped oneness because it's felt. And I've seen work like that. And I think in the end, that's what I'm trying to make, even if it's very rarely successful on that level, or it's never going to be successful on that level for every viewer. And thank you for coming to my talk. That's my consideration of all the work I ever made. Thank you. I'm upsetting my husband.
Matt has fled the room, so I'll just jump in and thank Sally again very much for coming in and giving up your time. I know some of you might have to run to classes, so please do feel free to do that. I don't know whether Sally may be outside of this because there might be something booked in that we need to get out for now.
Yeah.
You might want to take some questions outside the room if people want to make comments.
I'd come up if you want to ask a thing.
So, sayonara. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
See you around.